We're gonna start in Jungle Hub and look at naiads. Last playthrough, we looked at nuts and anthers, so I wanna get developing.
This week in game news, we have fresh controversy. Amazon Lumberyard is a game development service from Amazon, but Ian Bogost this week discovered that they will mail you wood if you ask nicely. Pizza Titan Ultra has been announced, and yes, it's a game about delivering pizza in a giant robot. Valve is in trouble in Australia. Race of the Sun is coming to Android. During an interview with Nikkei, Sony's Masayasu Ito mentioned that Sony's been considering plans to make the PlayStation VR work with PCs, and Orcs Must Die Unchained went into open beta on Steam. This is the Blackman and Robin Game News Update. This isn't an ordinary episode of Game News Update, mind you. Right now, we're preparing for Indiecade and PAX East. This episode's been prepared a little early, and the news will be shorter than usual. That said, we do have something a little extra prepared this week. We're talking about games to watch out for during E3 this year. Enjoy.
There's things about VR that just, you really have to reset your thinking.
To start with, Valve is in legal trouble in Australia because of refunds on their Steam service. Basically, if Steam or any other retailer wants to sell games in Australia, they're legally obligated to have a refund policy. Prior to 2015, however, they did not have one, and were thus in violation of Australian consumer protection law. Valve made the argument that they weren't technically doing business in Australia on account of there being a digital distribution platform. The Australian Federal Court, however, disagrees. There'll be a hearing on the matter at a later date. On the one hand, I'm not sure if Australian law should stretch quite so far as to touch an American company. While Valve could have stood to be a bit more forthcoming regarding refunds in the past, that they've implemented a refund policy for digital content is fantastic. That said, it's not as though they owe anybody damages for buying video games digitally when the majority of other digital distribution platforms offer no refunds. On the other hand, Steam's customer support is abysmal. They're slow to respond if they respond at all, and you might get an automated response to a very specific problem. Your Steam account could be stolen by a hacker in Tajikistan, and you could put in a support ticket for that, only to be told 3 months later that you should try power cycling your computer. Valve really needs to get it together in that aspect. What do you think? Is Valve in the wrong here? Is the Australian Federal Court being unreasonable? Let us know on Twitter.
Conflict. As the world teetered on the brink of anarchy.
Moving on to the week's controversy, it revolves around the upcoming Activision Blizzard game, Overwatch, and a change made to a character at the behest of a fan. In an open letter to the developers of the game posted to the Battle.net forums, user Phipps says that she appreciates the variety of characters in Overwatch, particularly the character known as Tracer, who's cool and all, but has a victory pose, this one, that according to this user, reduces Tracer to nothing more than a bland female sex symbol. Phipps goes on to explain that she's got nothing against quote-unquote sexy female characters in the game, but that the pose seems out of place for the character of Tracer, and she felt that it gave the game the wrong sort of message, that all female characters have to be represented in this way, making it something that she wouldn't want her daughter to have to experience in the game. Blizzard responded a few days later by removing the victory pose from the game. As you can imagine, this caused quite a stir in a number of gaming circles. The anti-censorship crowd roared out immediately, guns blazing, talking about women's liberation, shouting that female characters should be free to flaunt their stuff without shame. Meanwhile, another crowd roared back that Activision Blizzard should feel free to make whatever changes they feel fit for game. Yet another set of folks is insisting that this somehow constitutes video game fraud, and that Blizzard owes anybody who's ever considered buying Overwatch money in a class action lawsuit. There's a full spectrum of opinions on the matter. Personally, I'm kind of indifferent. I don't think that the pose is a big deal, especially seeing as other characters have it, such as Hanzo. What makes it different for Trace, however, seems to be her costume design, which places a fair amount of emphasis on her rear, compared to Hanzo's. Notice the difference?
What are you looking at?
I do think that it's important for a game with such a heavy focus on character to make sure that character actions fit character personalities. If the players feel strongly that some aspect of the game doesn't serve the story or a character, but rather detracts from said character or element of the story, you know what? Maybe the developers should consider changing it. That's not censorship, that's listening to your audience. At the same time, are you making changes to avoid backlash? Are these changes coming at the cost of artistic integrity? Some people feel that the change is disempowering. User Emma Moonkin took to the forums to express her disappointment in the decision. Much like Phipps, she too is a mother, and she doesn't think that Tracer's now infamous pose sent the wrong message. In fact, she felt that the removal of the pose sends another message. That female characters can either be strong or sexy, but not both, and that the change is alienating. The controversy over this change is going to burn bright for some while. Jeff Kaplan, the director of Overwatch, took to the game's forums to say that the art team didn't have a hard time pulling the pose because they didn't feel that it suited Trace very much in the first place, and that they already had a replacement pose ready for the character. Kaplan also said that if anybody takes issue with the decision, they're free to share their concerns and thoughts. This is a big issue, and we invite you, our audience, to weigh in. Do you think that Blizzard made the right decision in removing the pose from the game? Is it a matter of political correctness, or was it an artistic decision that better served the aesthetic and character of the game? Should game developers be worried about making specific groups of people comfortable, and do you think that this constitutes censorship? Let us know on Twitter at Blackman and Robin. We'd be happy to share your thoughts on next week's episode.
You know, the world could always use more heroes.
If you're a fan of the band Anamanaguchi, you may have caught what seemed to be a bizarre social media meltdown on Twitter this week. This comes shortly after the announcement that Anamanaguchi had spent the last few years at work on a video game, a bizarre vaporwave RPG called Capsule Silence. At the end of their ranting tweets, which are over a company called NHX that doesn't actually exist, there's a link to download the game. As it turns out, the whole thing was clever marketing for their upcoming album, which you can obtain by playing the game. It's a weird way of releasing something, but you have to give them points for cleverness. Anamanaguchi draws a lot of inspiration from video games for their music. In fact, they started off by combining electric guitars with a hacked Nintendo Entertainment System. They provided some of the music for the Bit Trip games, as well as the soundtrack to the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World video game adaptation. What you're seeing right now is a bit of their music video from Japan Air that was included somewhere in the files of Capsule Silence. In more ordinary game releases this week, we had a hardware launch, the Oculus Rift. The Oculus Rift headset is finally out in the wild. The first wave of pre-ordered headsets has begun to ship, and thus far the consumer edition of the Rift has gotten pretty good reviews from the critics and praise from the players. This virtual reality head-mounted display boasts positional tracking, a lovely high-resolution display, 3D audio, and a host of other features. It's expensive, but it's worthwhile. A couple of days before the headset launched, Oculus VR founder Palmer Luckey made a trip to Anchorage, Alaska to deliver the first Oculus VR headset to Ross Martin, who was the first person to back the Oculus VR Kickstarter. Everybody who helped crowdfund the device in 2012 received a finished consumer version of the Rift at no additional cost. A nice move on Palmer's part, though he was only planning on hand-delivering the one to Mr. Martin. With the launch of the Rift came some interesting games to accompany the device. There was the surprise launch of Farlands, which lets you explore an alien world. The game was a total surprise, courtesy of Oculus VR. I've not heard much about Farlands, but it is free if you own an Oculus, so that's a nice little bonus. The hotly anticipated Adrift came out this week alongside the Rift as a launch game. Its reviews from the critics have thus far ranged from mixed to positive. The main issue that most critics take with the game is that in spite of its brief length, it seems to drag on at times gameplay-wise. Apparently, it's a game that could have benefited from giving players more to do. I think it's in part a bit of bad marketing. I do remember the developers referring to it as a first-person experience, rather than a through-and-through video game, putting it in the territory of games like Dear Esther and visual novels. What I've been hearing from the players is that it doesn't really deliver on either the interactive story front or the video game mechanical front. It's got a heavy focus on the story, which could be good if the story and characters were stronger. Adrift is out now for Windows, and if it sounds like your sort of game, you might want to check it out in spite of its flaws. It is, after all, a beautiful game, and with regards to how it plays in virtual reality, it does make a compelling case for virtual reality storytelling, or at the very least, for the potential of virtual reality storytelling. If you'd rather spend your time in space dogfighting, you could try out EVE Valkyrie, which is available now for the Oculus Rift. Set in the universe of EVE Online, the premise of EVE Valkyrie is that your mind has been uploaded to a sort of computer that allows you to control ships. If you've read Ancillary Justice, you know what I'm talking about. It's a first-person multiplayer-focused action game in which you get to do battle against other ships, zipping through space. The game's gotten good critical response thus far, though there are some concerns regarding its monetization, which employs microtransactions to unlock things more quickly. If you pre-ordered the Oculus Rift, you already own EVE Valkyrie. Released on Steam Early Access this week is open-world seafaring RPG The Inner Sea. In the game, you explore islands populated by generations of castaways from different cultures. You can trade for resources, build up your crew, and do battle with other ships. If you're a fan of Sid Meier's Pirates, you'll want to check it out. The Inner Sea is available for Mac and Windows.
Some friendly, others spoiling for war and plunder. But more terrifying by far were the denizens that lay in wait beneath the waves of the Inner Sea.
We have some cool virtual reality news from Bandai Namco this week. From April 15th to sometime in October, Bandai Namco will have a virtual reality center open in Tokyo. Think of it as a sort of virtual reality arcade. It doesn't look quite as fully featured as the Void or Starcade, but I do like that it employs full-body motion tracking. If you're in Tokyo this summer, it might be worth checking out. You can pay a few bucks and tackle your fear of heights head-on, without dying. How cool is that? There will be other experiences, such as a mech battling game, as well as a skiing simulator, and a racing game. This week, we got a trailer for a neat-looking game that's coming from the mind of Phil Tippett. Tippett, in case you didn't know, is a veteran stop-motion animator in the film industry, and he was the dinosaur supervisor for Jurassic Park. You had one job, Phil. He also created the 3D holochess game in Star Wars. This week, we got the announcement that he's turning that game into something real. Hologrid Monster Battle. Hologrid is a virtual/augmented reality card and board game in which you use physical cards to place imaginary creatures into your real environment. What we know thus far is that the game will support both local and online multiplayer. No word on a release date or specific VR or AR platforms, but there are plans to bring it to mobile devices as well as to your standard VR and AR headsets. You can check out our report on the game at blackmanandrobin.com for more information and some screenshots. Well, that's it for this week's game news. For all the greatest game news, reviews, previews, and interviews, be sure to follow at blackmanandrobin on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me at Jordan_Cameron for my own views. Now stick around for our special presentation on games to check out this year at E3. And now for a brief word from our sponsor.
Here's a dirty little secret. When you wash your face at the end of the day, you might only be cleaning the surface of your skin. To clear those congested pores, you need a deep clean. And today, you can get it with Proactive's incredible deep cleansing brush. And here's something even more incredible. You get the brush free when you order a Proactive system today.
I love the deep cleansing brush because it really gets in those pores.
I was using a brush that was over $200, and I like this so much better.
This isn't just any brush. This is the only one from the doctors at Proactive, so it's specially designed for acne-prone skin. Call the number on your screen now to get America's #1 acne brand for just $19.95. Be among the first 500 callers, and you'll also get the deep cleansing brush free, plus more secrets for flawless skin. That's a $93 value for just $19.95.
You only have 2 hands, but you have a whole lot of bristles.
This is such an incredible offer that supplies are limited. Call the number on your screen now.
E3, or the Electronic Entertainment Expo, has been a force in the gaming industry since 1995. The annual industry conference differs from shows like PAX in that it's not really meant to be attended by gamers, but the press, publishers, and other industry figures. It's one of the biggest marketing events not only in the game industry, but in the tech space. How long will E3 remain relevant? That's hard to say. An increasing number of publishers, such as Nintendo, have been cutting back their presence at the show in recent years. The changing face of gaming journalism and video game PR may be the cause of this. After all, the landscape is no longer dominated by print publications, and streaming video online has become an affordable endeavor. Why rent a stage in Los Angeles in order to release some big news when you can just hold a press conference online for considerably less money? In spite of the changes, however, tons of people will be tuning in to E3 in 2016, primarily in anticipation of lame jokes from Ubisoft, to-be broken promises from Microsoft, and shiny CGI trailers that look far better than the games that they depict ever will. Cynicism aside, however, I'm actually looking forward to gaming's biggest marketing event this year. I enjoy watching the trailers as they roll in and hearing the announcements. The point of E3 is to sell video games. At least E3 manages to do so in an entertaining fashion. There are quite a few games that have been announced that were unveiled either last year or in previous years that we're still waiting to hear more about. We'll probably get more details about these games during this year's E3. Here are 5 worth keeping an eye on. Number 5. Horizon Zero Dawn. Currently in the running for Game with the Lamest Name, Horizon Zero Dawn caught everybody's attention at E3 2015, and for good reason. This upcoming post-apocalyptic ARPG puts you in a world of mechanical monstrosities. You get to fight titanium tyrannosauruses with a crossbow. How cool is that? Personally, I'm very fond of the game's setting and aesthetic. I love the idea of a post-apocalyptic game in which people are living in tribes and struggling against a robot dinosaur menace. Additionally, the game is very colorful. It's not all drab and washed out, but seems vibrant and alive. The last time I played a post-apocalyptic game like that, it was Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. Horizon Zero Dawn is supposed to come out in 2016, but we don't have a solid release date quite yet. That said, we can probably expect one to be announced during E3. Horizon Zero Dawn is coming to the PlayStation 4. Number 4. ReCore. Keeping up with the theme of robotic animals, we move on to ReCore. Currently in development by Armature Studios, ReCore is being designed by Keiji Inafune, the man responsible for the Mega Man franchise. When the game was unveiled at E3 last year, it generated a lot of hype, even though we really don't know how it plays. With Horizon Zero Dawn, we at least know that it's quite clearly a third-person action game, but with ReCore, we really don't know. We just have the motion equivalent of concept art. While ReCore has been confirmed for a PC release, so far it's only officially coming to Windows 10. We don't know if it'll come to Windows 7 or 8. It is, however, confirmed for the Xbox One. Expect to hear more about ReCore during Microsoft's press conference. Number 3. The Legend of Zelda, working title. Few game franchises have quite the staying power of Nintendo's first-party lineup, and the Legend of Zelda series has always been a hot seller for their systems. In 2013, Nintendo announced that there'd be a new Legend of Zelda game coming to the Wii U, though they never quite announced when we'd see it. It seems that 2016 is the year it'll finally be released. In case you're totally new to video games, what you should know is that the Legend of Zelda series is one of the most beloved game series of all time. It's a series of adventure fantasy games set in the land of Hyrule. Each game is full of strange and wonderful characters, puzzles, unforgettable places, and a whole lot of action. The series has been a source of inspiration for several other games, such as Okami. It's tremendously influential in the world of video games. What we do know about the new Legend of Zelda game for the Wii U is that it's designed to be a lot more open than previous 3D entries in the series, and it shall also be the largest in the series to date. Also, there's horseback riding. Personally, I'm looking forward to this game in part because it's Zelda, and I'm sure it'll be great, but also because of its art style. I'm excited to see the semi-realistic, but not particularly gritty aesthetic in action. There's something about this art direction that reminds me of Final Fantasy. There have been rumors that the game would be coming to the Nintendo NX, Nintendo's to-be-revealed platform, and it likely will be released on the NX, but well after its Wii U release. Number 2. The Last Guardian. Shadow of the Colossus was a smash hit on the PlayStation 2. In that game, every battle was a boss battle of tremendous proportions as you went up against a series of giants. It's a moody, atmospheric game, one with a fan base that's been waiting a long time for some sort of follow-up. Say hello to The Last Guardian. In development since 2007 by Fumito Ueda, who designed Shadow of the Colossus, it's not clear if this game is a sequel to the aforementioned, set in the same world, or if it's just a spiritual successor. That said, it does look interesting as you play as a kid who's friends with this bizarre winged hyena. The Last Guardian was thought to be dead up until last year, when Sony re-revealed the thing during their E3 press conference just to say, hey, it's still alive. For perspective, it was supposed to be released on the PlayStation 3. Here we are, a whole generation late, and it's supposed to be coming to the PlayStation 4 this year. That said, we still don't have a solid release date. Chances are we'll see more of it during E3, since this is one of the most hyped games in recent memory. Number 1. Obzu. Currently in development by Giant Squid, Obzu is the studio's first game, and it has a bizarre accent in its name, presumably to make it harder to search for online. What we know so far is that Obzu is inspired by Mesopotamian mythology and is set underwater. You play as a scuba diver, and your primary focus is exploring beautiful aquatic landscapes. There's apparently some sort of mystery to be unraveled. Also, you can ride sea turtles, which makes this a Game of the Year contender. Obzu is in development for the PlayStation 4 and Windows. I think that the game could work very well in virtual reality, though then again it might be difficult to translate because it's a third-person game set underwater. That presents its own set of challenges. 2016 is going to be a big year for E3 thanks to the rise of virtual reality. Expect to see VR games, headsets, and related accessories unveiled during the show. It's not just VR hardware you should expect, however. Nintendo will be revealing more about the Nintendo NX during the show. Rumors have been circulating about a new version of the PlayStation 4, a PlayStation 4.5, if you will, that plays games in 4K resolution, though none of this has been confirmed. What are you hoping to see during E3? A VR headset from Microsoft? A proper Star Trek video game? Just the announcement that Rihanna Pratchett is going to be hired to write for Mass Effect Andromeda? Hit us up on Twitter at Blackman and Robin and let us know. Be sure to follow us for all the latest game news, reviews, previews, and interviews. Follow me at Jordan_Cameron for my own.